What was meant to be heavenly became hell. I love you, Dad. That was the last message he sent his father from the airport before heading home. 30 minutes after walking through the door, he called police. Not to ask for help, but to report that he had done something to the woman inside that house. When police arrived, he did not run. He said nothing. He just stood there, red fluid still on his hands. Right near where he stood was a sharp weapon about 25 centimeters long. The woman did not survive, and the question no one could answer right then, why? They had just been away together, and they had just landed together. But within 30 minutes of walking through the door, everything was beyond saving. One night in August 2025, on Reid Street, Bassendean, an ordinary residential area in the Perth suburbs, Western Australia, the 000 Emergency Centre received an unusual call. The caller was a man. The first call connected, then was cut off immediately, with no explanation. A few minutes later, he called back a second time. This time, he stated briefly that he had caused injury to his girlfriend at her address in Bassendean. No further detail was given. Police and an ambulance were immediately dispatched to Reid Street. On arrival, they found Alisha Hendren-Krippner, 30, in a critical condition with multiple serious injuries. Paramedics intervened immediately and rushed her to Royal Perth Hospital as an emergency. The man who made the call remained at the scene, Tobias Nuttall, 32, the victim's boyfriend. He was held on the spot. Officers immediately noted two significant details: red fluid on Nuttall's hands and, close to where he stood, a sharp weapon about 25 centimeters long, still bearing traces of what had just happened. The entire house was immediately treated as a scene requiring strict protection. Tobias Nuttall was arrested at the scene. He did not resist. He did not attempt to flee. There was no action suggesting any intent to escape the situation. He was taken to the police station to begin formal questioning. The house on Reid Street was completely sealed off shortly after. Police tape was set up around the surrounding area. No one was permitted access, not neighbours, not the curious onlookers stopping outside. The crime scene examination team was called in and began working that same night. The roughly 25 centimeter weapon was marked, preserved, and prepared for transport for forensic analysis. This was the most direct physical evidence at the scene, and it would become one of the most important pieces of evidence in the entire case. Meanwhile, at Royal Perth Hospital, doctors were doing everything they could, but the injuries Alisha had suffered were beyond saving. Alisha Hendren-Krippner, 30, did not survive. The crime scene examination team worked through the night at the house on Reid Street. Every corner of every room, every surface was documented and systematically examined. Biological traces, fingerprints, the position of items in the room, all were collected and stored under strict procedure. The weapon was handled separately and sent for independent forensic analysis. What was recorded at the scene began to build a picture of what had happened in that fateful 30-minute window. A picture that did not fully match what Nuttall would later claim. Alisha's body was taken to a forensic facility for formal examination. The results confirmed the cause of Alisha's death was severe injuries, their extent and distribution indicating this was the result of a violent and sustained attack, not a random scuffle or an act of self-defense. Toxicology results confirmed the presence of methamphetamine in Nuttall's system at the time of the incident, information that would play an important role in the trial that followed. At the police station, Tobias Nuttall was formally interviewed. He was not silent, but what he said conflicted with the evidence in several important ways. Nuttall gave an explanation. The two of them had argued about the state of the house. Someone was due to inspect the rental the next day, and things had not been cleaned. According to him, Alisha hit him on the back. When he turned around, she was holding a weapon. He claimed he wrestled her to the ground and took the item from her, and after that, everything got out of control. He claimed he did not know how many times he had injured her. Police recorded this entire statement, and proceeded to cross-reference it against what the evidence at the scene showed. Alongside this, Nuttall's phone was seized and analysed. On it was a series of messages he had sent his father at Perth Airport just before heading to Alisha's home. The content of those messages would become an important part of the investigation file. The formal Western Australia Police investigation focused on reconstructing the entire sequence of events, from the trip to Sydney through to the moment the 000 call was made. The starting point was the flight from Sydney to Perth. Nuttall and Alisha had just finished a 3-day trip to Sydney. During that trip, the two of them had used drugs at the hotel, and tension between them had escalated significantly. At Perth Airport, before heading to Alisha's home, Nuttall sent his father a series of unusual messages.
Their content showed he was in a highly agitated state and felt he was in a situation he described as pretty bad and pretty dark. He said he wanted to talk privately with his father when no other ears are listening. Those messages were collected by police from his phone and became important evidence of Nuttall's psychological state in the hours before the incident occurred. Toxicology results confirmed the presence of methamphetamine in Nuttall's system, consistent with information that he was in a coming down state after drug use when he arrived at Alisha's home. All of this information, the travel timeline, the messages, the test results, and Nuttall's own statement, was brought together. And the picture that emerged showed a continuous chain of events, not a random, isolated outburst. Alisha Hendren-Krippner, 30, lived in Bassendean, a quiet residential area in the Perth suburbs. Those who knew Alisha described her in remarkably similar terms: kind, warm, full of life. She was someone who lit up any room she walked into. Her father, Kelvin Krippner, said in his victim impact statement to the court, "She had a beautiful laugh. She had so much to give. She had dreams. All of it was taken in a moment. Part of me died that day too. No father should ever have to bury his child." Her mother, Anita Krippner, said the family was trapped in a nightmare with no end. "There are times I feel like this isn't real. The grief is unbearable." Her cousin, Amber Tassone, said outside the court, "Alisha is not just a statistic. She was a girl with ambitions, dreams, hobbies, friends, and family." At the time of her death, Alisha was in a relationship with Tobias Nuttall, a relationship of about 6 months that had been gradually deteriorating. The two of them were in the process of breaking up. The silence her father later described, "The silence now is unbearable," is something no words in any language could ever fully capture. Tobias Marcus Nuttall, 32 at the time of the offence, was born and raised in Western Australia. His life had not been easy from early on. At age 9, he was abused by a teacher, an event the court later noted as part of his personal background. As he grew older, Nuttall worked at a service station in New South Wales. There, he was struck by a car, a serious back injury that led to chronic pain and PTSD. This was when he began using drugs, a path a judge would later describe as serious. His drug use grew so severe, he was asked to leave his mother's home. Nuttall later returned to Western Australia and began a master's degree in education, while also co-hosting an online podcast called Waking World, focused on conspiracy theories, the occult, and spirituality. It was during this time that he met Alisha Hendren-Krippner. Those who knew Nuttall described him as intelligent, curious, and loving. He held a philosophy degree and had no prior convictions. But behind that image was a man struggling with drugs, with a painful past, and with a relationship falling apart in a way he could not control. The relationship between Tobias Nuttall and Alisha Hendren-Krippner lasted about 6 months, and in its final weeks, it was drawing to an end. The two of them had been arguing, tension was escalating, and they were in the process of splitting up. Against that backdrop, the two of them travelled to Sydney for a 3-day trip. The night before flying back to Perth, they used drugs at the hotel. Tension during the trip continued to escalate, and according to information later verified, a trip that should have been an ordinary getaway became a continuous chain of tension. On landing at Perth Airport, Nuttall sent his father a series of messages, not naming Alisha, but their content showed he was in an agitated state and felt he was in a very bad situation. "What was meant to be heavenly became hell," he wrote. "I'm in a pretty bad situation. I want to talk when no other ears are listening. I love you, Dad." From the airport, the two of them went straight to Alisha's home in Bassendean. Within 30 minutes of walking through the door, Alisha Hendren-Krippner was no longer alive. According to Nuttall's statement, he and Alisha continued arguing about the state of the house right after arriving home. Someone was due to inspect the rental the next day, and things had not been cleaned. According to him, Alisha hit him on the back. When he turned around, she was holding a weapon. He claimed he wrestled her to the ground and took the item from her. He claimed he did not know how many times he had injured her and thought it was only about 3 times. That was Nuttall's version. But the forensic results did not match what Nuttall claimed. The number of wounds was significantly higher than the figure he gave, and there was no evidence at the scene supporting a claim that he was acting in self-defense. Justice Amanda Forrester completely rejected Nuttall's self-defense argument. There was no evidence confirming Alisha had attacked him first or was holding a weapon, as he claimed. The messages sent to his father at the airport, showing clear hostility and agitation before heading to Alisha's home, were found by the court to be evidence of his psychological state before the incident occurred. Toxicology results showed Nuttall was under the effects of methamphetamine at the time of the incident, consistent with the court's finding that he was in a state of lost control. The case file was built from multiple independent layers of evidence, and all of them pointed in the same direction. First, the weapon found at the scene, forensically analyzed and confirmed to be directly connected to the case. Second, the forensic findings, the number and location of wounds on Alisha's body did not match Nuttall's account of the number and circumstances of the attack. The severity of the wounds ruled out any possibility this was an act of self-defense. Third, the messages sent to his father at the airport, showing Nuttall was in a clearly agitated and hostile state before heading to Alisha's home. A judge later found these messages clearly demonstrated hostility within the relationship. Fourth, toxicology results confirmed the effects of drugs on Nuttall at the time of the offense, a factor the court acknowledged but did not treat as grounds for a reduced charge. Fifth, Nuttall's own statement. He admitted causing Alisha's injuries, even while trying to downplay their extent and shift blame onto the victim. There was no evidence supporting any claim that Alisha had attacked him first. There was no evidence of any controlling or violent behavior on her part within the relationship. The file was referred to the Western Australia office of the Director of Public Prosecutions, and the only remaining question was what Nuttall would face before the court. The Western Australia office of the Director of Public Prosecutions charged Tobias Nuttall with murder. This is the most serious charge in the Australian legal system. The prosecution determined that the full body of evidence, the weapon, the forensic findings, the messages, the toxicology results, and Nuttall's own statement was sufficient to prove the charge beyond reasonable doubt. They also made clear Nuttall's self-defense argument had no evidentiary basis. Nothing showed Alisha posed a threat to him. Nothing showed he was acting to protect himself. Faced with the full weight of the evidence, Tobias Nuttall pleaded guilty to murder early in 2026. No contested trial took place. The case went straight to sentencing at the Supreme Court of Western Australia. The sentencing hearing took place at the Supreme Court of Western Australia on 25 June 2026. Justice Amanda Forrester presided. Because Nuttall had pleaded guilty, there was no dispute over whether he had committed the offence. The hearing focused on a single question: what sentence reflected the true seriousness of what he had done to Alisha? The prosecution presented the full case file, the forensic findings, evidence of Nuttall's psychological state in the hours before the offence, his serious history of drug use, and, in particular, the messages he sent his father at the airport as evidence of hostility within the relationship. Alisha's father, Kelvin Krippner, read his victim impact statement to the court. Her mother, Anita Krippner, also gave evidence. Both parents described their lives since losing their daughter, a loss they said would never heal. Alisha's family sat in the courtroom and waited. Defense barrister Simon Watters represented Nuttall at the sentencing hearing. He acknowledged the plea. Nuttall had pleaded guilty. There was nothing to dispute on that point. But he argued over the factors that should be considered in determining the sentence. He referred to Nuttall's personal history, being abused as a child, a serious back injury leading to PTSD and chronic pain. He said Nuttall had read the victim impact statements and felt profound guilt. According to him, Nuttall said, "I feel disgusted with myself. I feel remorse." He also noted Nuttall had no prior convictions, held a high level of education, and was described by those around him as intelligent, kind, and loving. Justice Forrester listened to all of this and rejected it.
She found Nuttall had tried to intellectualize his actions, seeking to explain and reason around what he had done, rather than truly confront it. She concluded he had not yet fully accepted responsibility. She also completely rejected the argument that Nuttall had acted because he was controlled or threatened by Alisha. There was no evidence anywhere in the case file to support that. On the 25th of June, 2026, Justice Amanda Forrester handed down her sentence at the Supreme Court of Western Australia. Tobias Marcus Nuttall was sentenced to life imprisonment. The minimum term to be served before he can apply for parole, 18 years, backdated to August 2025, the date he was taken into custody. In her sentencing remarks, Justice Forrester said plainly, "You attacked Alisha in a manner that was brutal, entirely uncontrolled, and wholly disproportionate. There is no justification for what you did. You did not only take Alisha's life and rob her of a bright future, you are responsible for shattering the lives of countless others. Her family will never recover. Violence is never an acceptable response to conflict in a relationship. Too many people, particularly women, have died." Outside the court, cousin Amber Tassone said, "Alisha is not just a statistic. She was a girl with ambitions, dreams, hobbies, friends, and family. Every woman deserves to feel safe in her own home." Tobias Nuttall will not be eligible for release before 2043. Alisha Hendren-Krippner will forever be 30. But there are questions in this case without clear answers, and I want to hear what you think. First, Nuttall had no prior convictions. He held a philosophy degree, was studying for a master's, and was described by loved ones as kind. But behind that image was a serious history of drug use and a relationship falling apart. Were those signs enough for someone to notice and step in before it was too late? Second, Nuttall claimed Alisha started the confrontation. The judge rejected this completely. There was no evidence to support it. But the question remains, why, in so many cases, does a man kill his girlfriend and then try to blame the victim? And is this a pattern the legal system needs to address more seriously? Third, the minimum 18-year sentence. In your view, does that number reflect the true value of a life? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. I read all of them. The case of Tobias Nuttall and Alisha Hendren-Krippner is not a story about an evil man who appeared out of nowhere. It is a story about a man everyone who knew him described as kind, intelligent, and loving, who killed his girlfriend within 30 minutes of walking into her home. And that is exactly what makes it worth talking about.
The first lesson: the combination of a relationship falling apart and drug use is far more dangerous than outsiders can ever see. Nuttall and Alisha were breaking up. The two of them had just been through a trip full of conflict. Nuttall was coming down from methamphetamine use when he walked into Alisha's home. No one outside knew that. No one could step in. And within 30 minutes, everything was beyond saving. The second lesson: outward appearances say nothing about what is happening inside. Nuttall hosted a podcast. He was studying for a master's degree. He had no prior convictions. Those around him described him as interesting and kind, and he killed Alisha. Violence in a relationship has no fixed face.
It can hide behind qualifications, behind intelligence, behind glowing descriptions from loved ones. The third lesson: when a relationship is ending under tension, that is the most dangerous point. The breakup period is the highest risk stage in many relationships.
Add to that the effects of drug use, impaired judgment, escalating emotion, and weakened self-control, and the risk of escalation into violence rises significantly. Alisha Hendren-Krippner had dreams. She had a family who loved her. She had loved ones who remember her laugh. And all of it was taken within 30 minutes, inside her own home, in an ordinary neighbourhood in Bassendean, Perth. If you or someone you know is in a relationship that feels unsafe, don't wait. Call now. In Australia, emergency 000. 24/7 domestic violence support. 1800 RESPECT on 1800 737732. Crisis mental health support. Lifeline on 131114. Crime Files AU produces this content for the purpose of informing and educating the community. We condemn all forms of violence. All information presented is based on court records and verified news sources.